Hi, everybody. I'm Carin, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, and thank you for having me here for the next several weeks. Glad to be here. I'm happy to know a lot of you in the room, which is comforting to me. So, my sobriety date is September the 8th, 1988. So, coming up a couple of months, we'll have 37 years of continuous sobriety. I am a one-chip wonder. So, I want to say that. No talking yet. We'll get there. I am from New York City, in case you haven't figured that out from that amazing introduction. I'm from the Upper West Side of New York, 87th Street and West End Avenue, and my home group is First Things First on 96th Street and Broadway. We have 4 meetings every morning, 6 o'clock, 7:15, 8:45, and 10:15. And for the first 15 years of my sobriety, I went to every single one of those meetings. Every single one. I'm not saying that I loved AA. I'm saying I didn't know what else to do with my time. You know, you show up there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then you leave out of there at 11:30 in the morning. You've done half your day and you're sober. So, a couple of things I want to blow out right now before we begin. We're going to do a step series here, and if you've never done the steps before, this is not going to do much for you. Because I found out the hard way, or the easy way, that when I did the steps with my sponsor, I learned very little about myself. I actually didn't know anything about myself when I was done. What I figured out, what I did do, was I did a good job for him. But for me, I didn't understand it at all. I didn't really find out anything about myself, and I didn't find God in this program for 5 years. So figure that one out. But I got the steps, and I understand them, and they're off the wall, and they're in my heart, because I've worked them for a couple hundred times with sponsees. And a couple hundred times with people I didn't even sponsor who just wanted to go through the steps. So if you don't get it, it's okay. You're not ready to get it. Once you go through this whole thing, then you can grab a newcomer and talk to them about it. Because an intimate relationship between you and the person that's doing the steps only brings you to yourself. It does not bring you to the other person. And by the way, that adage is good for all in life, period. Whatever relationship you're in, whatever intimate relationship you're in, it only brings you to yourself. So I just want to say right from the get-go, because I said I was going to do this, is I showed up last month when Maddie was leading this series because I wanted to see how it was done. I didn't want to come up here and make a fool out of myself. And Maddie came up here, he had like 6 books. And I thought, God, he's smart. Here I am. I have nothing. It's just me. It's just me up here. So, and I have a few notes that I made, but I will tell you that I brought my 12 and 12. And the reason I brought it is not because nobody has a 12 and 12, but nobody has a 12 and 12 like this 12 and 12. You know, when you get sober in New York, there's a propensity to get like first offs of things that they publish because they think we're idiots and, we're not going to notice that the steps are written wrong in my 12 and 12, that they've changed the words, that all the page numbers are different. All this made me do all these years is pay attention. Really pay attention. When they say we're on page 36, I got to scramble because it's probably page 42 where I'm coming from. So you're going to get me and my sobriety and where I came from. And I want to tell you that tonight while we're on step 1, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. But I'm not going to tell you anything about coming into AA because the first step for me is the most important step there is because it's the step that defines us as an alcoholic. And if we don't get the first step, we have no business being here. So I'm just going to put this out here right away. The first step is simple. It says, we have them written anywhere? They're not on the walls anywhere. Okay, so they're on the walls right there. So it says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol when I'm drinking it. Hello? I am not powerless over the alcohol that's in the package store 5 miles away. Then what does that mean I'm powerless? Well, for me, I don't know if an alcoholic like me, I don't know who I'm waking up with. I don't know where I'm waking up. I don't know what I've done. I'm a blackout drinker. I've woken up on stage before, and I have no idea if I'm getting an award or giving an award. No idea whatsoever. So I am powerless over alcohol when I'm drinking it. And then it says dash. And in the English language, dash means end of one thought and beginning of the next thought. Think about that. It says dash, that our lives have become unmanageable when I'm not drinking. Now, if either one of these things are not true for you, if you are not powerless over alcohol when you're drinking and your life is unmanageable when you are not, then you go. Because guess what? Congratulations, you are not an alcoholic. You are somebody who has a drinking problem, who just has to put down the alcohol, and your life is going to be fabulous all again. But if you're an alcoholic like me, my life was split. I drank and used heavily for 25 years. And by the time I was done, I'm a nice Jewish girl from the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I am well educated. I had a weird family life, which we'll get into. But I was all coming. And by the time I was done, by the time I came into AA, I was walking on the streets of Broadway, eating out of garbage cans in my pajamas. And how does that happen? One day at a time. So I want to say that I just came back from the international conference in Canada. And there's a couple of my buddies who were here. And I actually took my New York posse with me. I sponsor all of them. We had 6 of us in the group. I sponsor many more than that. We'll talk about that later. But 5 out of the 6 I sponsored. And the 6th guy was the guy who was there when I came in. It's good to have a reminder all the time. Don't ever be the one in the room with the most sobriety when no one's ever seen you drunk. You know, that is a recipe for, Chuck Chamberlain used to say, it's a recipe for being an expert. Who's an expert? Anybody who's 500 miles from home. And so if you don't have somebody in the room with you that's got more time than you, then you've got that propensity for this big shotism. Anyway, I took all these beauties with me, and we hadn't seen each other for a while. We see each other on Zoom every once in a while, and we went everywhere together. I mean, we really went everywhere together. And, it was beautiful and crazy all at the same time. We went to the international call-up. We went to meetings together. We went to everything. And we went to the big meetings together. And on the first night of the big meeting, when they were doing the parade of flags, I saw tons of people that I knew, just tons of people, about, 30, 40,000 people there. There were a lot of alcoholics there. And when we were done with the parade of flags and the speaker, and everybody was, hepped up about this whole idea of being at the international convention, then they let us out. And there's like 30 or 40,000 alcoholics walking on the streets, of Vancouver with really no lights on the streets. So one of the women that I sponsored who was next to me, she had trouble walking, and I thought I would do the right thing. And I turned around to help her and did not see the cement divider in front of me, and went boom, went right down, cracked my cheek, was bleeding all over the place. I don't know why my pants didn't rip, but I was very happy because they were expensive and I just bought them. But everything under my pants was a bloody mess. Anyway, so they sat me down because I said that I was nauseous from hitting my head. And a guy comes up to me and says, just sit down. I'm a paramedic. Don't worry about it. And then another girl kind of walked over and said she was a nurse, and she stood there. And then the cops came, and it began to be dramatic, which for an alcoholic like me, I kind of love the drama. And so everybody is coming around. And next thing I know, some young guy comes over and says, listen, I think she's going to be okay. She looks okay, but you got to go down here because this woman fell and she broke her nose. And then we got another one over there. That woman fell and she knocked her front teeth out. I'm like, oh my God, I am so lucky here. Then, the ambulance comes, and I don't know about you, but I'd never been inside of an ambulance. It was very exciting for me. And, anyway, so I sat in the ambulance, and the first thing that what do they call it? EMT? One of the first thing the EMT says to me is, have you had a drink today or any mind-altering drugs? So I started laughing, which at the time I didn't realize is a very drunk response. And she turns around and says to me, we're very serious here. We take these things very seriously. And I said, well, you see all these thousands of people. I said, we're here for a conference of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she goes, what does that mean? I said, that means that everybody who's at this conference, 30, 40,000 of us, have convened from all over the world, really, to talk about the gift of sobriety and the joy of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she put down her Band-Aids, because I was bleeding everywhere, and she said, can you tell me about the program? So I want to say that if you stay sober long enough, you're going to get these God moments. They happen all the time. You just have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. I got sober with this woman in New York. She scares the crap out of me, actually. She comes up to about my waist, but she's like 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide. I mean, she's just this powerhouse. And, when she comes up to you to give you a hug, you better run. I mean, it's like and she would say to me all the time, Carin, stuff happens when you're not paying attention in AA. Stuff happens. You got to pay attention. You got to pay attention. So I want to talk about why we have to do step 1 perfectly. This worked a lot better when I wasn't so old that I needed glasses, but I'm definitely going to try this up here. Maybe it's going to work a little better up here. Okay, so we've talked about why it says, and you'll hear this. By the way, here's the thing. Here's the thing I really want to get clear here. in your whole life in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to hear this phrase, which makes me crazy. It says, when I came in, they said this and they said that. And I'm like, who were they? And then I say, how did I become they? I just became old. They were just old. They weren't wise. They were just old. So they would say that step one is the only step you have to do perfectly. And I'm a why baby. W-H-Y. I'm not a how baby. I don't care how you do the steps. I cared why I was doing it. And I made my sponsor, Albert, crazy. In New York, we're not so good with the rules. So we didn't do the men with the men and the women with the women. So my sponsor was a black man with dreadlocks and that and you'll hear about this later, that, covered his hearing aids. He never heard anything I said anyway. But, it was a great relationship, by the way. I should have had a relationship like that in all my marriages. I'd still be married. But, he basically taught me, we went through the steps together, and he taught me what I needed to know. But I said to him, why do we have to do the first step perfectly? Doesn't perfectly mean in the eyes of God, like perfectly like God? And he said, doesn't mean anything like that. That's the only step that we have that will define you as an alcoholic. And then we went through the step. And if I was not powerless over alcohol when I was drinking it, or my life was not unmanageable when I wasn't, I had no business being there. And believe me, that stuck in me, because when I was 5 years sober, I made the decision that I wasn't an alcoholic. And that I decided to go out there and do some whatever, and I never got to whatever, because God bless New Yorkers, they're physical. And I was in a very physical group, and I was literally held down and not be able to go. So, it is what it is. So a couple of things that I wrote down here on my whys. Why does self-knowledge on the first step avail me nothing? It's a really interesting question, because, I go through my life in AA thinking that if I know something, I'm going to do something. When you know more, you do more. But it's not like that at all. It's actually, as long as you stay, you're going to figure out everything they tell you in AA is untrue. It's the opposite. They just tell you that to keep you coming. But the reality is, it's opposite. Because only stupid people get this program quickly. The smart ones, we're screwed. Because we're thinking of the why and the when and the how. And we're thinking of all these questions, when really all it's told me is that I'm powerless over alcohol when I'm drinking it. And that my life is really bad when I'm not. My skin is too tight. It doesn't fit. And so it leads me to, we used to have parables and stories in New York, and you're going to get them all. And this is a story about the guy, the alcoholic on the Titanic. Does anybody know that story? I don't care. I'm telling it anyway. So there's a guy on the Titanic. He's clearly a drunk, because as everybody's playing the fiddles and running to the, whatever those things are, those boats, like the lifeboats, he's on the deck, drunk, saying, I am not getting on a lifeboat until I know what speed we were going when we hit that iceberg, how big the hole is in the hull, how much longer it's going to take for this ship to go down. I need the information before I make a move. It's the kind of alcoholic I was. I needed the information before I would listen to what you have to say, trust what you had to say was real, and then go ahead and take baby steps to do it. And so what happened to the guy? He died. He died, because that's what happens to us when we need too much information. One of the worst things, I made this list, it's so funny, of things that are not true in AA. I don't know where that came from, but I thought this would be a good place to go over them. And the first thing that I heard in AA, believe me, you did not want to sponsor me, because I was filled with this. First thing I heard in AA is, this is a simple program for complicated people. It is not. That's lie number one. This is a simple program for alcoholics who like to complicate things in our lives. That's what this looks like. And why do we complicate this? So we have some false sense of control over this program, and control over the steps, and control over our behavior. This is not a complicated program. This is the simplest program you will ever come across. And we are not complicated. We are more simple than you'd like to believe, but we like to complicate things. We like the drama. We like to make scenarios. We like to talk about things that aren't actually in there, make up stories, because everything is about control. Okay, so the first step talks a lot about honesty. That's the principle behind the first step. And by the way, I don't actually believe, if any of you have studied the principles, that the principles are behind the steps. I think you get the principle when you do the step. After you've done the step, it comes to you in a little gift box and says, here, this is your gift for completing step one. And that gift for step one is honesty. It's just honesty. And it's mentioned 19 times. And Norm Maltby, an old speaker, used to talk about the first step being seconds and inches. Like we never knew, 3 minutes over here more and 2 feet over here, more over this way. And you would have a different speaker for yourself tonight. I just wouldn't be here. So I can no longer read because the list is coming down. So I have to go back this way. Is that your camera? Okay, I kind of messed that up. Okay, so another why. Why did I have to accept everything that I lost? Why did I have to accept that? That was an interesting thing because I had lost marriages, 5 of them. Show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. That's all I want to say. So I had lost marriages, money, family, friends, jewelry. We just had this discussion before the meeting that, when I go into a drawer to take something out to put it on, I realize that I've sold it. I sold everything I owned for drugs and alcohol. That's just the way that it was there. So why do I have to admit all the things that I lost? Because I have a bad memory. I have a bad memory. And when I don't remember things that happen, I am doomed to repeat them. I've heard this talk over and over again in the first step that, we're survivors in AA. We come from I have a very low bottom, an extremely low bottom. And I come from a low bottom and I came into AA and I was a survivor. Well, fast forward 35, 36 years, and now I've come to understand that being a survivor is not an asset in my life. It's actually a defect. Because by being a survivor, all it does is set me up for the next crisis. That's it. But by learning through God how to thrive in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and how to thrive in life through Alcoholics Anonymous, it sets me up much better, don't you think? So, sorry, I lose. I have to put them on. I've lost. Okay, so the next question that I was asked was, why steer me towards something I don't believe in? That bothered me. Why do I need to do this? Why do I need a God? Why do I need anything like that? Why do I need a higher power? This was in the first step. I had a hardcore sponsor that said, he literally, I will beat you down until you get this, but you are not going out in that arena again. He used to make me stand up in the room, raise my hand and say, my name is Carin, I'm an alcoholic, and I have a God of my understanding. And I said, and I don't believe it. And that's what I would say every time. He said, you're not saying that for you, you're saying that for other people who don't believe it. I have very good programs in this friends in this room with 40 and 50 years of sobriety who only survive on an intellectual type of God, an intellectual understanding of God. And many, many more people in here who get through the first step or reading the first step and think I'm going to be doomed because I'm never going to find a God. And we play comparison games with other people who talk about their spirituality. But the reality is it doesn't matter. It simply doesn't matter. It's whatever works for you. And my friend Kenny's got, 40 years and he's got a God of an intellectual brand, which I don't have. And we'll, talk about that a little bit later. So, those are all the questions that I was asked, and I kept them all these years. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself pre-AA. This is not going to be anything before I got into AA, but you're going to see very clearly how I fall into 2 categories of the first step. What I did when I was drinking and the really bad things I did when I wasn't. I grew up in a household of alcoholism, godlessness, and excommunication. And those are 3 things that'll really bring you down. I'm from a family of Holocaust survivors, so there was very little, cheer and fun in the house. My grandparents came to live with us for a long time. They carried that whole weight with them in the house. There was no God in the house because if there was a God, how could he have done this? Understand, the rest of my family died in the camps. The rest of them were gone. I mean, as the years went on, by the way, some of them popped up around the world, which was crazy good. But at that time, we thought everybody was gone, and he had 11 brothers and sisters, and he was the sole survivor. And my grandmother also had 10, because they had big families in Europe, in Eastern Europe. And so, God was not in the house, because if there was a God, he never could have done what he could have done. And then, my father was an alcoholic. My mother just enjoyed her highs. I don't know how else to put it. Her medicine cabinet was gold to me. And she never noticed. She replaced. And, I found out, I started using when I was nine, and I have no memories of my childhood before I'm 9. I need to say that. Something happened. I don't know, but I have no memories. But I know something happened because I started using at 9 years old. And so, they did a lot of doctor work on me and psychology and all this kind of stuff. And nobody ever found out what happened. And they couldn't put me under, long enough to figure out. And frankly, I don't care. I think it's extremely important as a sober alcoholic that you own up to everything that happened to you. And then you put it in a drawer. Because that's not who I am today. I don't even recognize who I am today compared to who I was 36 years ago. There is no comparison. And we'll talk about that, a little bit later on. And the excommunication, that's super important. When I have a family that excommunicates you. So my mother didn't see her brother for 50 years. And my father didn't see his own family for like 40 years. When I came into AA, finally came into AA, I had an older brother, 2 years older than me. He was my get-high buddy, my drinking buddy, and he thought it was the ultimate betrayal that I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And actually, when he drove me to the meeting, on the third time he drove me when I was going, he said, "Don't worry about it. I'm not really worried about you." He said, "Because you're going to go in there and one day they're going to figure out who you really are and they won't let you stay." This is 36 years later, and I remember exactly what he said. So 35 years ago, he disappeared, and we don't know where he is. I mean, he's alive. That's what I know. I worked in various organizations that will allow me to find him, but non-communicative, just gone. When someone wants to go, they go. I thought to myself, well, I'm going to break this chain when I have my kids and I have a son and he hasn't seen his father in 10 years. I don't know what this gene is, but we got it. And when I talk to other Jewish families, they got it too. And I think it has a lot to do with just wanting to forget and just not wanting to face up to whatever was there. So it was, kind of a bizarre household. My father was a World War II veteran, and we took, I think I was maybe 13 years old. I don't know what you do when you were 13, but when I was 13, I went through my father's drawers because he had good stuff in there, and I didn't know what I could find. And one day I found, a bag of pot, which was fabulous, but I also found a Cuban passport. And then everything opened up in my family. We kind of blew apart because we hadn't been told that my father had been born in Cuba, that there was this history of the United States not accepting us, this whole history of alcoholism coming in. And so, when you grow up and you have these certain tenets to be true, and everything blew up by the time, I was 13 years old. So, things changed after that. They absolutely changed. I was singing by the time I was 10 or 11. I had a great singing voice until I was blacking out and I didn't have a great singing voice. I'm telling you, I used to wake up on stage in the middle of a song and all I was singing was la, 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 because I couldn't remember the words and I didn't know where I was. And I got fired from almost every singing job that I did. And I opened up for stars, by the way, for big stars. And I would open up for them because I had this bubbly personality. They didn't realize that I was high. And I would get on the stage and I just couldn't remember anything. So that was it. They got me off pretty quickly. And I was fired from almost every job that I had. I don't really care, actually. So I really don't care. So the other thing I want to talk to you about is this is just my personal stuff. So when I was drinking, I met my first husband. We all know I've been married 5 times. Some of them are more interesting than others, let me tell you. Some of them just have names of the week. But, they're all out there, and one died, but the rest of them were kind of the same person over and over again. All alcoholics, all drug addicts. All doing well in life, but they were functioning alcoholics. And my first marriage, I married somebody 11 years older than me, and it was a horrendous, violent marriage. We were using, we were drinking, back and forth and back and forth. And at the end of this marriage, drunk, he went away to work in one day, and I called somebody in, and they built a wall in the middle of the apartment because I asked them to. This is Manhattan. Let me talk about real estate. Real estate. You're not giving up your real estate so fast in Manhattan. And so they came in and they built a wall. So when you walked into the apartment, you had to go to the right or the left. So, the kitchen was in front of you, but, on the right there were 2 bedrooms. On the left there were 2 bedrooms, and there was a bathroom on either side. So I really didn't think he would mind, actually. And so after I did it, we sat around and we got really high, and then I got scared, and then we ran away because that's what you do. That's what you do. And when I came back, I thought that we had been robbed, actually, because every single thing in the apartment was cut in half. Everything. Television, the couch, all my clothes, all the artwork on the walls, everything was cut in half. And I called the police because nobody was there. And I thought we had definitely been robbed. And when the police came, he came into the apartment and said to the police, "Oh, my name is Dr. So-and-so, and, this is my wife, and she's under my care." And it was like, and they said, "Oh, we understand, Doc. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." And they left me with all of this, garbage in there. Anyway, it took me 3 years and $300,000 to get divorced from this doctor. And, there's a pattern with all of my marriages. I didn't take anything. Nothing, not a dime. I just needed to go. It's a running line in my life is I gotta go. I'm a running alcoholic, and I have to work very hard on that in sobriety not to run. Anyway, so that's how I am when I'm drinking. Then I got married again. I was in a bar on the Upper West Side with my girlfriend from Australia, and we used to ask who was the most destitute men in the bar. We were looking for poor men, and we would go home with them because we figured they deserved us. We were like their prize for being poor. And so one night, we asked something, and some guy with a British accent, and when they have a British accent, you think they're smart, but they're really not. They're just British. And he said that, what did he say? He says, I'm destitute. And I said, well, come on. So I took him home, and I don't know, maybe 30 days later, I married him. That's just the way that it was. I didn't know another way. And he needed a green card, and I needed to get away from, from husband number one, because that divorce was finally, was fine. And I really didn't drink a lot in this marriage because I knew what drinking and drugging had done to me in the first one. So I was really determined to keep this one, together. And I got pregnant, and I was a dry drunk when I had my pregnancy. And anyway, so not drinking, my skin is getting tighter. The world is not looking right. I can't seem to make sense of things. And I have these neighbors upstairs in the brownstone who are practicing to be flamenco dancers. So they would pull the rug back, and they would, that all night long. And I'm not drinking, and I'm not using, but my skin is getting tighter. And I don't say anything. And then one day I come in, and with my little boy, he's an infant at the time, maybe he's a toddler, and we walk in past the vestibule, and she comes running downstairs and says to me, "You need to stop your little boy from peeing in this vestibule because it's disgusting and it stinks." Well, we never did that. It was obviously homeless people coming in because you could get into the building, and I said to her, it's not him. And she said, "Don't you lie to me. I know exactly who it is." And she went back upstairs, not drinking, not using, not drunk. And I went into my apartment and put my son in his father's lap, and I said, "Be right back." And I went up those stairs and knocked on her door. And by the way, I'm 5'8". She was probably 5 feet tall. And I knock on the door. She opens the door. That is the last thing she did. My hands went around her throat. I knocked her to the ground. Her legs were underneath me going like this because she can't get out from, and I am going to kill this woman for what she said to me about my son. And the next thing I know, his father was pulling me off of her. That's how I am when I'm not drinking. That's what I do when I'm not drinking. I'll tell you something funny. I was probably 25, 30 years sober, and I'm in Manhattan, and on the bus. I hate the bus. I hate the bus. And I'm on the bus because I just probably couldn't get a ride any other way. And while I'm on the bus, this woman sits down next to me, and she turns around and looks at me, and she goes, "Oh my God, it's you." And I look up, and it's my upstairs neighbor. And by the way, just so that you know, she wasn't on any of my lists anywhere. I just simply did not remember what I had done to her. Not even there. Because I wasn't drunk. So it wasn't in that category. I hadn't learned that yet. Anyway, and then I started thinking, oh God, do I have to do a 9th step? And it was just so awful. And then she kind of took over, on the bus, and she's talking to me, and we're talking about life, and we're talking about our children, and where her daughter is, and where my son is. And by that time, and you'll hear about this later, I'd had a massive tragedy in my life. And when I was telling her about it and telling her that I was, sober 30 years and Alcoholics Anonymous and back and forth, and she looked at me and she said, I don't know what's happened to you in your life, but you appear to have found something that people are looking for. And she said, don't lose it. Just don't lose it. So is that an immense? I don't know. I find that another God moment. I think all of those things are God moments. I have a big, bad, huge, hulking God in my life because I lean hard. And I've been to human help, and human help failed me. And I would just say this, one of my friends, you'll hear about her too later, who died right after the Atlanta conference, used to say to me, if you want to clear out a room of Alcoholics Anonymous, just start talking about God. And so, this is your chance. They have 2 doors. You can go because that's where we're going. I just need to let you know. Okay, so a couple of other things. Now, when I'm drinking, this is how I behave. I call my friend Fat Black Judy, who's my best friend, and I say to her, and Fat Black Judy at the time is 400 pounds. Now she's like 150. She did whatever she had to do, but she's 150 pounds. And so I call Fat Black Judy, and I said, you know what? I just have this thought. What is going to happen to us if we get really old together, and they're not going to think we're cool anymore? I have no idea what I thought was cool about us, but she said, well, I think we ought to get some tattoos. And this is so long ago for any of you New Yorkers in there. Getting a tattoo in New York was illegal. You couldn't even get them in Manhattan. And so we got on the train and we went to Yonkers, New York. There's no reason to go to Yonkers for anything, other than the tattoo parlors and the bars. And that was it. And so we went to we got out there, and she upped our cool factor because she couldn't find a babysitter and brought her son in a stroller, and we're looking to be really cool and do all of this. And we walk in, and I said to her, I'm really not ready to get this done. She goes, I'm not either. We went to the bar with the kid, by the way. We had no problem ever bringing our kids to the bar or the crack house or anywhere else, to tell you the truth. Wherever I went, they went. That's how that worked. And so we went to the bar and we drank. And, I'm a Jack Daniels drinker straight up. Anything else, I'm sorry, was just like a wussy drink. I wanted nothing to do with you, especially if you had like an umbrella or something in there. Anyway, so we sat there knocking back Jack Daniels, and I said, are you ready to go? She goes, I'm ready to go. So we take the kid in the stroller, and we stroll down the street to where the tattoo parlor is. We looked at the sign. It says, they will not treat you if you've been drinking. We turned right around. We went to the bar, and we drank more. And then we went back there because we knew that sign didn't mean anything. They were just trying, that was like a CYA. They just want to cover themselves. And so we came back a little while later, and we were drunkety drunk, really drunk enough. And so we walked in, and the guy said to me, what do you want? And this I'll never forget. He put on a white coat like he was a doctor. Like that would make me feel secure being in this like sleazy place. And I said, I really don't know what I want. And Fat Black Judy goes, she wants something big. Just make something big. And I said, no, I can't do something big. I said, let's do something tasteful. Like a little rose somewhere. Like that'll be tasteful. Just a little rose, like right here. And so he says, I can do that. Meanwhile, what is it, 35 years later? It's like a long stem rose now. It's not at all what it was before. But at the time, it was this teeny tiny, tasteful rose. Now, Fat Black Judy came out with a huge thing on the front of her chest, because she's just nuts. But let me tell you, after they gave me the tattoo, that's the last thing I remember, because I'm a blackout drinker. That's how I am when I'm drinking. And the next thing I know, I'm at my apartment, knocking on the door of my own apartment, because I can't find my keys and I don't know what to do. And my husband, the British one, my son's father, opens up the door, takes one look at me. I look over his shoulder, and we are having a dinner party. And they're all around the dining room, and he's cooked this meal, and they're all looking at me, and I do not understand why their faces have that look on them. And so he said, you better do something. And so by that time in my drinking, I was drinking in the shower. I don't know about you, but the shower was great. Nobody bothered me. And by the way, FYI, I do all my praying in the shower now. I do my praying, I do my crying, I talk to God. The shower is my happy place. It's if you've not learned how to pray to God in the shower, you are missing something amazing. Anyway, so I went to the bathroom because I knew all my stuff was in there. I took one look at the mirror, and I realized that we had a little problem. The first thing was I had a black eye, and I don't know how it got there. Second thing was I was missing my front tooth. And the third thing was that the whole front of my shirt was covered in blood. And I thought, well, I guess, we have an issue here. We got to figure this out. So I had clothes in the bathroom because I'm living in the bathroom. And I got into the shower and I showered off everything. And I looked in the mirror and I put some, whatever that stuff is, that makeup stuff here to take care of concealer, take care of my black eye. And I get my hair going the way it's supposed to be going. And I reach in my pocket. My tooth is in there. Went to the medicine cabinet, opened up, got the crazy glue out, crazy glued my tooth back in my head, and looked and said, we're ready to go. Let's go. And I walk outside and I sit at the dinner, and not only, he was a fashion photographer, not only were we having a dinner party, it was a dinner party with Vogue. And they were all at the table. I'm sitting there with this tooth that like a snap. Oh my God. Meanwhile, my dentist fired me because he couldn't get the tooth out for 3 years because it was crazy glued up there. He just fired me. That's my behavior when I'm drinking. So I want to make that very, very clear that I didn't behave any better when I wasn't drinking than when I was drinking. And many of us come in here and we misread that first step and we say that we admit we were powerless over alcohol and that it made my life unmanageable. And it is the opposite. I had far worse things go on when I wasn't drinking. Now I'm pregnant, and I'm pregnant with my child, and I'm pissed. I'm pissed because I can't do the things that I need to do because I'm pregnant and people are watching me. And if you're an alcoholic and a drug addict like me and people begin to watch you, it's very scary. And they are watching me during this pregnancy to make sure that I don't pick up. And I'm not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm just not drinking and not drugging. And so I am in the car. We had a car, and I'm driving in Manhattan, and I'm probably 7 or 8 months pregnant. And by the way, I look disgusting. I am not one of those glowy pregnant women. I am a woman that looks like she needs a fix. She looks like she needs a shot of Jack. That's what I looked like my entire pregnancy. And so there was a car in front of me, and who was too slow for me. And I got out of my car with a baseball bat and went after this guy in his car. And I did not hit the car because he got out and he grabbed the baseball bat. And he said to me, "What is wrong with you?" And I thought, I have no idea. That's my behavior when I'm not drinking. Does everybody get this? Don't think that alcohol is the root of your problems. It's not the root of your problems. Alcohol is on one side and my problems are on another side. And when I put down the alcohol, I was left with me. And that was far worse than the alcohol. I wish I had an alcohol problem because I could have done something about that. I could have put it down. So a couple of things that I want to wind up with so that you kind of get anything that I could have possibly left out. You know, other things that go on in this program that almost killed me, that I'm sure are killing people out there. Some old timer says to you, "This is a great program. Take what you want and leave the rest." How the hell do I know what to leave? I don't even know what to take. What are you telling me? I didn't know what to do. Finally, you know, I don't know if any of you remember Clancy Imelson, who was my mentor from the day I walked into this program. I mean, I really stand on the shoulders of greatness with him. And he said to me, no, sweetheart. He said, "You take it all. You take every single morsel, even the bad stuff, because one day you're going to use it. Just shove it under your chair and you'll use it at some point." Another one, find a sponsor, find someone who has what you want. How the hell do I know what I want? I'm newly sober. I don't know what I want, and I sure don't know what a sponsor is supposed to give me. I don't know what a sponsor does, but I do know that you're telling me if I don't get one, I'm going to drink. And then I hear all these other things, you know, get somebody who, you know, you've got something in common with. Well, the things that I would have in common with someone, I don't want them to sponsor me because I know what my behavior is. I want someone who's better than me because I don't want that. So that's like asking a child to pick out their parents in the room of Alcoholics Anonymous. You have no idea. Ask around. Listen. Go to the meeting. Shut up. Don't share. Listen to what other people are saying. If they say something that resonates with you, if they push that God button in you that says, "I know exactly how they feel," that's the guy for you. You don't have to like them. As a matter of fact, sponsorship works better if you don't like each other. I mean, I got to tell you, I am not friends with any of my sponsees. You know, you'll learn about Albert in the next time you meet. But I sponsor something between 15 and 20 people at any given time, and I frankly don't like any of them. And none are here tonight, so I can say that. I love them all, but I don't particularly like them. I wouldn't go out and do something with them. They wouldn't be part of my friendship circle. But I picked a sponsor that I had nothing in common with. Nothing at all. And yet, I recognized his anger. You know, I say this because there's a lot of women in here tonight, and I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, with a great deal of anger. And I had come from a home of terrible physical violence, and my first 2 marriages were unbelievably violent. And I thought that when I raised my voice to somebody, a man, that the way that they could argue with me is that they would just smack me and I'd shut up. And it worked. it worked for a long time. And so I didn't understand that kind of anger, but I did know that my tongue could level you. That I knew. And so, my sponsor, Albert, showed me how to do that, showed me how to have a conversation. And so when I picked him because I recognized his anger. And more importantly, I recognized that he had figured out a way to contain his anger. And I desperately wanted not to be so angry anymore. This is going to be highly controversial. Get out of Zoom. Get out of the Zoom meetings. Get into the real meetings. It's so unpopular for me to say that I don't care anymore because I'm here for the hugs. There's some kind of chemical that happens when you hug someone in AA, that I don't get on Zoom. I've seen more body parts in Zoom than I would like to admit. I have seen every person do things that I didn't even know were humanly possible to do things like that. I've seen all of these things, but what I haven't seen and I haven't heard is that laughter. And I haven't heard and I haven't heard the guy in the front row going like, she's full of crap. I haven't heard any of that on Zoom. I hear silence. And I speak on Zoom all over the world and have for many years pre-COVID. So I tell you that if you want quality sobriety and you want to be loved into sobriety, and I have been loved into a very lovely life today, let me tell you, get out of Zoom. Get up. Get in your car. Get to a real meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We have produced an entire generation of Zoom babies who have no idea what it's like to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is our responsibility to let them know this is how it works. This is how it works. Not on Zoom where I can take my screen out and I'm knitting or doing the dishes or whatever it is I'm doing. This is Alcoholics Anonymous. So I can see your faces and I can hear you. And yes, I can smell you. It's important to be able to do all those things. So, and it is let us love you until you can learn to love yourself, except that I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't want to be loved by you, and I sure didn't want to love myself. I really just wanted to be left alone, and that's how I shared when I came in. My name is Carin. I'm an alcoholic. In those days, by the way, what's it called? Crosstalk? Crosstalk didn't exist. It was called feedback. And so after you would share, some old fakakta timer would get up there, and he would talk at you about what you just shared. And I would say, my name is Carin, I'm an alcoholic, I don't want to hear your feedback, I don't want to hear anything you have to say to me, and by the way, when the meeting is over, don't hold my hand and leave me alone. And you know what happens when you do that? Nobody talks to you, nobody holds your hand, you're not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but you can't get thrown out. How about that? You can't get thrown out because we have a tradition that says that I'm allowed to stay. And I stayed until I was able to hold someone's hand. And I stayed until I was told to keep my hands to myself and not hit other alcoholics or my microphone. Anyway, I want to leave you with this, is that I didn't think I was going to be able to take an hour up in this, but it's rather fun. So thank you, Maddie, for pushing me in here. When I came, and I'm going to end with this because next week we're going to talk about the second step when I actually came into AA. And that's my third set of behaviors. So is that I came into First Things First, and it's a small room. It's called the Little Room. It holds 34 people. That room is running simultaneously on Zoom, which I do go to because I want to see my homies. There's 200 people in that meeting, which is, crazy, and they're coming from all over the world. This particular meeting is one of the largest meetings in Manhattan. It's known, all over the world, and so I still go to that one day a week. I do service there on Tuesdays. I host a meeting because I believe in service in that meeting. But when I came into the room, we speak a different language here in Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't really speak English. We have like platitudes and slogans and all that kind of stuff, and if you're new, you're never going to understand that. I sat in the room, and the wall was covered. All three walls were covered with signs, these crazy signs. But they weren't signs like those nice signs over there. They were hand-done signs. Some of them were done in crayon, and some of them were done in paint. Some of them were done where you cut the letters out of the magazines like a ransom note. Some of them were like that. But in the right-hand top corner of the room where I sat down, there was a sign that said, "One day you will know a peace that surpasses all understanding." And I said, I'm in. I'm in. Thank you for letting me share. It's been a pleasure.